Hello and welcome to a Wednesday edition of the SportsIntel.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Goldberg. Today I'm joined by Eric Gibbs and Vic Choxy, the usual crew. Yesterday I went solo to talk about my man here in San Diego, Fernando Tatis Jr., and we'll bring in the other guys to get their thoughts on, what do we want to call it, 3-0 gate? Slam gate? We have to give it a name at some point. Tingler gate? That's what I would call it.
Whiny gate.
Terrible. So anyway, guys, so I've decided, I want to tell you guys a little bit about me. So when I was a little boy growing up in West Hartford, Connecticut, my favorite athlete was Roger Staubach. He was my first ever hero. Captain Comeback, right? And then he retired in 79, and I transitioned right into Larry Bird. Larry Bird is my all-time hero in all sports. Then, he left in the early 90s. There was kind of a void there. There wasn't much going on. And then the Red Sox brought in Pedro Martinez. And then not long after that, David Ortiz. And those two were my two huge heroes, leading us toward now. But I got to tell you right now, my all-time hero right now is Fernando Tatis Jr., and I'll tell you why. After everything that happened Monday night, after his own manager threw him under the bus for swinging at a 3-0 pitch with the bases loaded in the eighth inning of it when they're up 7 runs, his own manager ripped him, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen ever. I'm furious that he still has a job. But the bottom line is, yesterday the Padres play again. They play the Rangers again yesterday. They're up 6-0, and Tatis is on second base. And what did he do? He stole third base with a 6-run lead. Unwritten rules, huh? Here's your unwritten rules. I'm stealing third base with a 6-run lead. What do you think about that? And so Fernando Tatis Jr., that was the greatest response to a ridiculous criticism I've ever seen in sports. And he's my new all-time hero. I just thought that was the greatest thing, that he broke a whole new unwritten rule after getting killed for breaking unwritten rules. So you guys, we didn't get a chance to talk about this yesterday. Eric, I'm sure you have an opinion.
Never.
You never. When you heard about this, I was probably I can guarantee you I'm the only one of the three of us that actually saw the home run in real time, because we were watching the game here in San Diego Monday night. But what did you think? Where do you come down on this?
It's completely ridiculous from start to finish. Like you said, the fact that his own manager didn't have his back speaks volumes, right? And that just is not setting a good precedent for the team. Something's got to happen there now or after the season. Something's got to happen. But Tatis was doing exactly what he's on the field to do. If the teams were so worried that the game was already a blowout and there was no reason to score anymore, they should have called the freaking game. But as long as the players are still on the field, it's a live ball. Anything goes. All this crap about unwritten rules, forget it. He did what he was on the field to do, and he should be applauded for doing it.
He has my applause. Yeah, I have to say, I did actually I found one example of a former Major League player who had a real problem with Tatis. It's been pretty universal that people are lining up behind Tatis and supporting him. And, even I thought the best thing that came out of yesterday is that the world discovered that Johnny Bench has a Twitter account. Who knew, right? Johnny Bench is on Twitter, man. And Johnny Bench, you don't get any more old school than Johnny Bench, right? He came out, he was totally in support of Tatis. Absolutely, you swing at that pitch. That. And Reggie Jackson, why is Reggie Jackson on Twitter, But there he was, same thing. Absolutely supporting him. But the one guy I saw last night that was ripping him, Keith Hernandez. on the Mets broadcast. They asked him about it. It was him and Ron Darling, and boy, I'll tell you, you would have thought that Fernando Tatis stole Elaine from Keith Hernandez, like stole his girlfriend. He was furious, and even Ron Darling was like, you know what, Keith, I've known you forever. We played together, and we've brought. And Ron's like, I totally disagree with you, Keith. So even Ron Darling was supporting Tatis, but there is a little bit of it out there. I think if you get super old school, you're going to find people that had a problem with it. But Vic, what did you think?
I loved your rant, and I agree with everything you and Eric said. It's BS, and I am glad that he stole third base yesterday. That literally made my day when I saw that pop up on my Twitter feed. I'm not a Padres fan, so I'm not watching like you, but it's a joke, man. These unwritten rules to me is a joke. This is why a lot of the younger generation is not getting into baseball right now, right? And so I'm glad he did what he did. I'm glad he stole third. And to me, out of everyone calling him out, his own manager calling him out was the most ridiculous thing out of it all. And so, you nailed that on the head. He's a young player. You don't throw him under the bus like that. You talk to him in private. If he does it again or does it a few times or doesn't listen to you, use the media, go ahead. But to call him out like that, to me, was the biggest joke. And I hope, again, there's not going to be any repercussions. But like you said, I have no clue. Like if I was the owner and my best player, my youth, my talent, put on a show like that and then gets called out by the manager, I would be ticked off and I would have something to say to that guy for sure.
Yeah, Ron Fowler, who's he's the principal owner of the Padres, and he's not shy. He came. I remember after the season last year, they fired Andy Green and they brought in Jace Tingler. And Ron Fowler was basically like, if this team, this of course before the world blew up, but he was basically like, if this team does not make the playoffs, more or less, like he was gonna clean house. He was gonna fire everybody. So I mean, it was a shot across the bow of AJ Preller, and an early. I don't even think they had hired Tingler yet, but I gotta think that, particularly the fact that, and maybe this is why it happened, and I alluded to this in the thing I did yesterday. Jace Tingler. So he got hired. I think it was December. It was winter. So he's only been in the organization for 8 months. He's only been managing literally for 20 games. But he'd spent the previous however many years, decade or whatever, in the Texas organization. So he knows everybody on the Texas side of the field. And he knows Chris Woodward. I'm sure they're really good friends. And I have to think that the reason he reacted the way he did is because he probably felt bad for his old buddies on the Texas side. And I'm like, dude, you're wearing the Padres uniform now, okay? You're not in Texas anymore.
Yep.
And those guys are not your friends anymore. You want to be friends with them in the offseason. You want to go fishing in December with those guys? Fine. But you're trying to beat these guys now, and you got to look out for your own guys. Don't look out for Chris Woodward. All right, I'm sure he can take care of himself. Chris Woodward, by the way, and don't get me started. I'm going to relitigate what I said yesterday. This is the guy that let his first baseman drops the ball in the last game of the season, intentionally lets a pop-up drop. In the last game of the season last year, so his pitcher could get a milestone, 200 strikeouts. And you didn't have a problem doing that. I'm sure there's at least 3 or 4 unwritten rules in violation there. But this he has a problem with, and so Jace Tingler, you're the Padres manager, okay? Act like it, and yeah, to call out your player, and not if you want to call out some veteran guy or whatever, this is a player who's going to be probably going to wind up being the best player in the history of the franchise. All respect to Tony Gwynn, God rest his soul, but you know what? This guy's better. He may not hit 400, but he can do everything else. He do things a lot better than Tony Gwynn could ever do. And you're not. Why are you even messing with a guy like that? 21 years old, or at least why are you doing it in public? And maybe he just needs to learn. Maybe Jace Tingler is a rookie manager and he needs to learn. But oh God, that honked me off the most, more than anything else about this. The fact that he would say that publicly. that you have an office for a reason. There's a door there's an office door for a reason. Use it. So anyway, I guess I'm still a little bit hot, but
Rightfully so.
But obviously Tatis, as we said, as Vic pointed out and we pointed out, Tatis is going to do what Tatis is going to do, man. And I think that's why him stealing that base yesterday, that was his message to everybody. That look, I play the game. Look, he's trying to win too. I mean, you want to fault Tatis for anything? It's that he's aggressive. He's trying to win. How about we bring a winning culture to San Diego for the first time ever?
To your point, Jeff, I like what David Rossi said. He said he wants his guys to, swing away, Cubs manager, swing away and do what they want to do in that instance. And he said when they're up that much, he's not even sending signals and stuff over. He's just trusting the players to do their own thing. And, maybe that's because he's an old player. Maybe he's a little, younger. I don't know. But to me, that was the best answer that I heard from a manager. And, that's why I wish Tatis had a guy like that in his corner as his manager.
Yeah, and people in San Diego, and look, I was probably first in line at the end of last year that Andy Green needed to go. Like the Padres have the players now; they have a chance to be a winning team now with this collection of talent, especially this collection of young talent. And Andy Green was just not the guy. He was never going to be the guy that was going to lead them to the playoffs. Now, I figured they would go out and they were going to get someone like Socia or Joe. I thought Joe Girardi would have been perfect for this team. And so I was surprised when they went. Now, I understand the general manager also has ties to the Texas organization. So I'm sure he's known Jace Tingler for a long time. And so he brought him in. And he probably figures, I'm going to bring this guy in and really I'm going to run the show and Tingler's going to do what I tell him to do. That's my assumption as to why that happened. But I can tell you what now, for whatever I didn't like about Andy Green wouldn't have got up in front of the microphone and said Tatis shouldn't have done that. He never would have done that. He never would have said that. He might have said something to him and probably, he would have done it the right way. So I don't know. I just couldn't believe it. And I think that's the reason this became a story. I think if it was just Chris Woodward popping off after getting his ass handed to him, and then he was complaining about it, and maybe he's trying to defend, the pitcher, moron. Like I said, couldn't find the plate against Tatis, and then he tries to hit Machado. He can't even hit Machado. But, maybe he's just trying to protect the pitcher who he's lucky he didn't get thrown out of the game and absolutely got the suspension he deserved. But, all right, I don't think that – I think that's it. It's just a manager pulling – but the fact that Tingler agreed with him and then said – I think that's why this became such a big story. And I wasn't real impressed with Tingler trying to backtrack on it yesterday either. I mean, his backtrack wasn't any better than what he said originally. So as a fan of the team, I have to admit I'm now very concerned that
go ahead. The backtrack was a suggestion from someone higher up saying he should probably make a public statement. There's no excuse for it, right? Behind closed doors, if he wants to say something to the player and say, hey, this is a gentleman's game and we've got to look out for all teams and players, fine, behind closed doors. But as soon as you step across that plate and you're putting it out there to the public, man, that is just completely messed up. Yeah. And I have a feeling that he was asked, probably maybe not so nicely, to issue a public statement about his remarks.
Yeah, but even then, I felt like the statement he issued, like to try to explain, this is what I really meant. That was just as lame as what he said the other night. I mean,
yeah.
But hey, do you guys? I want to also talk a little bit. I mean, look, we're all well, I'm not as young as I used to be, so I suppose I should probably be old school. I don't know how you guys feel. Do you feel young? Do you feel youthful? This whole idea of all these unwritten rules. I feel like it's like this is why baseball is nobody wants to watch it anymore. If we're gonna conduct ourselves, the fact that you would not be jazzed up for the fact that this guy hit 2 home runs in the game and drove in 7 runs and he's got all this flash and he's so exuberant, and he hustles all over the place. And we're going to try to curtail that enthusiasm because somebody's feelings got hurt. I mean, you certainly don't see that in the other sports. And I'm like, is this like explain why baseball is just not popular anymore? I mean, isn't this like a perfect example? And I was going to give I'll let you guys can talk about that. I have an example I want to give from I want to go back into the history books for a minute. But I mean, would you say that's a fair statement that unwritten rules are doing as much damage to the game as the length of games?
I don't know if we could really say that. I mean, I think it would take a lot of investigation to actually explore whether or not that's part of it. Unwritten rules have been around for forever, right? And it comes down to whether or not teams want to abide by them. They're ridiculous. I mean, the only rules that matter are the ones that are in the book. Everything else is just BS, plain and simple. If it were that important, MLB would write it into the rule book. So forget the unwritten rules, right? Let the game be played on the field in accordance with the bylaws that they've already put in place, and screw everything else. Like you said, 7 runs off of one hitter in a game, that should be the headline.
Right. Do you guys remember a prospect for the Mets from about 15 years ago named Lastings Millage? Does that name ring a bell?
No.
Okay. Well, the fact that it doesn't ring a bell is kind of a story in itself. So Lastings Millage was a top prospect in the Mets organization, right? And remember, the 2006 Mets went to the National League Championship Series. They had that crazy 7th game with St. Louis. Andy Chavez made that ridiculous catch, and then Carlos Beltran took strike 3 to end the game back in 06. So they had this prospect named Lastings Millage, who was supposed to be like their Tatis in the minor leagues, right? He was going to be this guy that was going to come up and he was going to change the game and he was going to do just be a superstar player. And so they brought him up in the middle of the season from AAA. And I think it was I don't know if it was his first game. It was one of his first games, and they were at home, and he hit a home run. And, first major league home run, right? And the crowd is going, because they know who he is. They've been hearing about Lastings Millage, all throughout his minor league career. He was, he's the next big guy. He's the next David Wright, And so he comes up, he hits a home run, crowd's going crazy. So he goes back to the dugout. And then the inning is over, so he's going to go out into the field. So he comes out of the dugout, and I think at this point, I guess it's still Shea Stadium at this point, 2006. But anyway, he comes out of the home dugout and starts to head off, I think, to the out. I think he was an outfielder, so he's heading to the outfield. But he kind of ran like along the stands, and all the fans in the front row are reaching their arms out. They want to give him a high five. He just hit his first major league home run. So Lastings Millage goes over to the stands as he's running out to the outfield. And he's slapping high five with all these fans, right? And what a great moment, right? Like he's engaging with the fans. He's the next big player in the city, and now the fans are going to love him because he's he's actually interacting with them. And I'll tell you what, game ended, and they read him the riot act. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever show up the other team, because they accused him of showing up the other team because he was slapping high fives with fans in the middle of the game. And it they sent him back down, and it derailed his whole career. And it's like, what is the problem with that? Don't you want to grow the game? Don't you want fans to have that kind of interactive level with the player? And boy, it was so frowned upon, and because it was an unwritten rule. You don't slap five with fans in the middle of the game because you're showing up the other team. And I thought, well, that's why baseball's never going to have an increase in popularity. That if you're gonna frown on something like that, I don't know. Baseball just frustrates me. That it seems like at every turn they do things to prevent them from capturing fan imagination. And I thought that I'll never forget that. It was a perfect example. And I remember, Mike and the Mad Dog, the next day talking about it, and it's like, what's wrong with giving some high fives to some fans. Like, really? Like, you're destroying the fabric of the game? I don't know. So anyway, that's just it was something I didn't mention it yesterday, but I always think of lasting village.
I mean, you could be right. You look at football, right? You see players when they score a touchdown always jumping up at fans. You see some of it in basketball, hockey. We won't even get into hockey and all the crazy crap they do with their fans. But baseball has always been kind of more subdued, and perhaps it is time to come out of its shell and really get more involved with the fans.
Yeah, I just think, and again, it's not. I mean, I just use that as an example, just because the crime that was committed, it was unwritten rules. That's what they taught. The unwritten rule is, you don't show up the other team. Boy, I'll tell you, baseball. I never realized how sensitive baseball players really are. Man, I'll tell you, the worst thing you can do in baseball is make the other team upset. I mean, you guys, I'm sure you remember, the great Jose Bautista home run in that crazy playoff game against Texas. What was it, 2015? They had that crazy inning, and he hit the home run. And he threw the bat. It was the bat flip to end all bat flips. It's in Toronto, and the crowd's going insane. And they started a fight over it because the Texas people, you're showing us up. I don't know. You think anybody in the NBA, you think guys on the other team care when Damian Lillard hits one from 80 feet and he does the little, checks his watch, game time? No.
If you're getting shown up, do a better job.
That's right. I just think, Damian Lillard checks his watch. I don't see anybody, throwing punches or starting fights or doing it. It's that's part of the game. And it's part of what makes it so much fun. And, so I don't know. Baseball's never going to learn that lesson, I just feel like.
I vote Jeff Goldberg for MLB commissioner.
Oh, that's a mistake. That's a mistake. But I'll tell you one thing: bark in the park everywhere. We'll do bark in the park so I can get my dog on the field. But that would be my first rule. Hey, so we're gonna. Speaking of Damian Lillard, I mean, I think we have to talk about what's going on with the NBA, because as much as we're annoyed with baseball, we're loving these playoffs, right? We're loving this bubble. The bubble is the best. The NBA is great right now. And what Lillard is doing, I mean, those games yesterday, we got Orlando knocking off Milwaukee, and then Lillard, again, 35, 36 feet to put that game, not put it away, but give them the separation they needed. And the NBA is fantastic. They should bring that back. But Eric, you had a problem. You had a problem with something that went on Monday night. Talk to me about your unhappiness with a certain officiating situation Monday night.
Oh, it just seems really whacked that Porzingis could get ejected. I've seen the film, right? And what he did was nothing compared to what we've seen in games over and over. And it just seems like he got picked on during that game for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into any type of conspiracy theories. I don't believe in them. I think that if the Mavericks really wanted to win, they still could have won the game without him. But it was a BS call on the part of the refs. He did not deserve to get his second technical and get kicked out of the game.
Do you think is there anything that can be done there? It seems like my mind always goes back to what happened to the Knicks that one year when Patrick Ewing came off the bench. He didn't really get into the fight, but he stepped off the bench and they suspended him. So he missed, was the game 7? I guess he missed and they lost. And it's playoffs, right? I mean, there's got to be a way to officiate these playoff games where you're not throwing a guy out. I mean, unless he's absolutely drawing blood, pulls out a shiv or something and stabs a guy. But other than that, I don't know. It seems like they really should not be so quick to throw out a star player in a playoff game.
Well, I don't think we can say just star players, right? I mean, it has to be across the board.
Right.
But after the game, the refs got together and wanted to take back the technical. And it's kind of late, guys. I mean, the damage has already been done. Put him back in the court. Yeah, okay, now what? The game's over. Mavericks lost. What are you going to do? Short of replaying the game, or at least a quarter. Things like that just can't happen to begin with. I think, not to be opinionated, across the board in every sport, the refs are not living up to standards that they previously were held to. I think that refs everywhere need a refresher course, more guidance, more control. They need to be held more accountable when they make mistakes. And if they can't hack it, get them out of there. There are plenty of guys, plenty of trained, educated, smart people that could step in and ref a game properly, that take it seriously, that take it with the amount of respect it deserves, the position deserves. And when you have guys blowing calls and not being held accountable with anything more than just it's okay, you made a mistake kind of response, it's what? So what? They're going to still move on. They're going to get their pay. They're going to get their fame and their position. They're going to go on their talk shows, get paid. They don't care. So they got a little talking to. Big deal. Until you really hold them accountable, nothing's going to change.
Vic, what conclusions should we be drawing from what happened yesterday? Milwaukee's now down 0-1. The Lakers are down 0-1. A blip, or we got a situation potentially happening with these series?
Before I answer that, yes, I agree. The KP stuff was total BS, man. So, but now it's too late. That really screws them. I think Clippers roll now. That was their best chance. But I think the Bucks is a blip. I think the Lakers are on the ropes. And I put out PDX as a long shot right before the restart, if you remember, on SportsIntel.com.
Yes.
So they're dangerous. Dame time. They got the guards. And I think the biggest alarming thing from the Lakers game last night is Portland's D has been Swiss cheese the entire restart, right? Like the Nets backups, I think, scored like 120 against them. And the Lakers didn't even crack 100 against them yesterday. So Anthony Davis has got to play a lot better. There's no reason he can't score 35 easy on Portland. And I don't know, fellas. I think they're on the ropes, man. I don't know about you guys, but guards and wings win championships, and that's what Portland has in that backcourt. And the excuses have kind of already started. It's kind of funny, but the narratives that we always hear with LeBron are back. The coach should have done better. His teammates suck now. Et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I've said I've been off of the Lakers. You know this, Jeff, because you read my stuff. And I'm on the Clippers wagon, but I do think Portland's going to give them a run for their money.
Well, let me ask you this: Is it fair to say, hey, look, they don't have Rondo, they don't have Avery Bradley, right? They're missing people. Kuzma has just not been the guy at all. Is there some truth to the fact that this is not really the Laker team that walked off the floor at the beginning of March and then we didn't see again for 6 months? Other teams got go ahead. I say other teams got healthy, other teams got people back, and it seems like they've just lost people.
That's fair to a point, but then my whole issue with the whole narratives thing is everyone is dealing with all of the same circumstances, right? Like, so the Blazers, they lost Ariza. They didn't have Collins. They're missing two big cogs, right? And everyone's dealing with the restart. Everyone's dealing with no fans. But yet LeBron and the Lakers keep bringing that up as some kind of excuse. You're the number one seed in the West playing the 8th seed that barely got in to the playoffs, that gives up 120, 130 points a game. To me, you should take care of business in the first round. And missing Rondo, missing Avery or not, like, those are just excuses. And that's my big thing with LeBron. Again, he's one of the best players of all time, but to me, Jordan will always be on a different level because of these narratives that always come up, and just to me, Jordan 1 has never lost a game to an 8 seed, right? And again, just LeBron making the pass to Caruso late instead of making something happen, taking it in, or AD pulling up fadeaways, and again, that's on LeBron and AD, and so that's where my frustrations come in a little bit, and so your point is fair, but again, everyone's dealing with all of the same circumstances.
Vic, are you seeing any other team? I know, again, you were very high on the Bucks, very high on the Clippers, and Portland was your sleeper. Is there another team that you've got your eye on right now that you feel like needs to be taken seriously here as a playoff sleeper?
I mean, the Raptors were good. I just don't think they have enough at the end of the day. The Rockets, I know you were high on. You pointed it out. And if Russell Westbrook comes back healthy, I mean, that's a dangerous, dangerous team, man. Those two guys can go. And like we had talked about, they can hit a lot of threes. And if they can just catch fire, they're kind of like that squad in the gym, right? That it can catch fire a weekend for those AAU tournaments, or I don't know if you guys have played in some of those like just weekend kind of double elimination type tournaments, and there's always like a team that's not the best team there, but gets super hot and pulls it off and wins that chip. And so that's another team I think that has that ability to get hot and kind of win this whole thing. But other than that, I don't see it. Still don't see anybody other than the Clippers or the Bucks taking it all.
Yeah, I'm holding out some hope for my Celtics.
Man, I love them. You know this, and you were shaking your head last time when I said like, "Hey, that's a team that I think can get there." But that Hayward injury is huge, man. He was just starting to play, and now he's going to be out 4 weeks, and then he's going to have a kid in a month, right? So, which he's already said he's going to miss time for. Then he's got to come back, quarantine, get the negative test. So, I mean, you're looking at him gone now for the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah, but I have a weird thing about that, and it's the same thing with like the other Boston team right now. The fact Tuukka Rask leaving, I think that's gonna. And I'm a big Tuukka guy. I'm not knocking him, but you could just tell he was not right, and it was just like him leaving. I think was the best thing that happened to the Bruins. Bruins are playing great, and I do think that they're rallying around Halak, and I think Tuukka just getting out of there has actually turned out to be a good thing for the Bruins. Even though look, he's one of the best goalies in the league, and I have a feeling that Hayward not being there could actually turn out to be a good thing. Well, the one thing I think it'll do for sure is like, and not that he's not already doing it, but it just puts even more of the burden onto Tatum. And I think Tatum is like, I accept the challenge. He's just emerging. He keeps emerging and emerging as a real force, a superstar in the making. And I think now that he knows he's going to have to shoulder even more of the load, I think he's going to rise to the challenge. And at least in this series, I mean, I don't think there's any, with Simmons not there, I think Tatum can carry them past Philly. And did you see any of the, Vic, did you watch any of the game one with the Celtics and the Sixers?
I did. I watched the game, and I agree with you. I think Tatum's that caliber of a player. I just don't think they have enough to win it all.
I just want to ask you, did you think Embiid looked really like he was just like out of shape? I don't remember him. He looked like he could barely stand up half the time.
Yeah,
like he really seemed to be laboring a lot.
It's either, to me, it's got to be one of three things. Yes, he's out of shape, he's hurt, or he just doesn't want to be there. Like he knows Simmons is out, and like he didn't want to go to this whole bubble thing, and he just wants to go home because that was a terrible showing. I mean, the guy literally can dominate in the paint and score anytime he wants to. And he just, the way he played in game one. But the one thing that scares me a little bit, counterpoint to that, Jeff, is as bad as Embiid played without Simmons, and the game was close. I mean, they still had a chance to come back and win that game, right? So, but yeah, to answer your question, man, he looks terrible out there, and this is a guy that should be a top 5, top 10 player in the league to have an outing like that is in the playoffs is honestly kind of embarrassing. And I'm an Embiid fan, so I'm not a hater or anything like that.
Yeah, no, me either. I actually I used him in my DraftKings the other day, and then I'm watching, and it just seemed like he would go up for a rebound and he would like jump for the ball, and he wouldn't come within 3 feet of it because he completely mistimed his jump, and he was like it seemed like he was constantly like on the ground, and or like the game was like about a half a speed faster than he was, and I thought, what is wrong with this guy? This is like supposed to be one of the most dominant players in the league. And it looks like he they're running up one way, he's still running the other way. And I don't know. I thought it was really. I don't know. Yeah, was he hurt? Or I don't know what the deal was, but it was very underwhelming for someone of his talent. But so we'll see there. But anyway, I wonder if I think this is like what they used to call the Ewing theory with Hayward. That now that he's not in there, that the rest of the guys are going to all step up, and Jaylen Brown and all these guys are gonna fill the void, and it's actually going to wind up being a net plus. But we'll see. I guess that's my green-colored glasses in effect there. But so anyway, but as we've seen now, I mean, we know one thing for sure: these bubbles work. The NBA bubble couldn't be going any better. The NHL bubble couldn't be going any better. Even baseball seems to have at least shown it can handle adversity and play, even with teams. Now it's the Cincinnati Reds' turn to be the team that's out with the virus. But they're somehow managing to get through, and so that leads us to the final piece of the puzzle. And Eric and I were talking about this before the show a little bit. I'm actually, and I've been down on the NFL being able to play the whole time, but right now I'm feeling pretty good. I think now I'm feeling like the NFL is gonna happen, and they're gonna play, and they're gonna manage to get through this. And Eric, you are carrying the torch for the NFL. Talk to me about how you're feeling about where things stand right now.
Yeah, this has been an emotional roller coaster for me. I was certain 100% that there would be a season when the coronavirus first started to make its way through the channels earlier this year. I started to lose that certainty at the beginning of June. Got even a little worse when the college football league started to call off their activities. But here we are, 22 days before the start of the season, and it really looks like we're going to be able to pull off at least somewhat of a regular NFL season this year. And of course, that is just making me ecstatic. The league is apparently making a lot of moves to ensure that it can happen. There's still a lot of work to be done, but they've already started running tests, making changes to stadiums, making changes to protocols to protect players, to protect staffers. And right now things are looking pretty good. It looks like we will actually see, players on the field on time come September 10th.
Yeah, I think I'm guessing that they are looking at baseball because that's really the comp. I mean, it's as we've talked about in other shows. It's really hard for them to duplicate what the NBA and the NHL are doing just from a logistics standpoint. But they must be now looking at baseball and look, baseball's had all kinds of problems. I mean, St. Louis Cardinals are going to play doubleheaders like every other day in August to try to catch up for all the games they've missed. But they're playing. Baseball's playing, and it's going to turn out to probably be, barring some. And it seems like they've figured out as they've gone along. I know the Reds are having their problem now, but they seem to have nipped that one maybe a little bit in the bud. And so I'm sure the NFL is saying, look, we may run into a problem here or there where a team has an infection issue. Well, that's okay. Everybody else will keep playing, and we'll make up the games when we can make them up. And the season can last as long as it needs to last to make sure everybody plays the right number of games. And pardon me, I was going to say, they don't have to have the Super Bowl on February 3rd. They really don't, if they can't, right? I mean, it's not like 80,000 people are going to be going to the Super Bowl because nobody's going to the Super Bowl. So if they need to push that back a week or two, they push it back a week or two. Look, it's whatever. It's a pandemic. So I agree. I think the issue isn't so much whether they can play. The issue is, can they are their contingency plans for when a team can't play going to be solid enough that they can survive it? And baseball has shown, yeah, we can survive it. As bad as things look with Miami and St. Louis, we can handle it. We can get through it. And so I think that bodes well for the NFL. But Eric, here's my other question. We've seen the cutouts behind home plate at baseball games. We have seen the virtual fans at the NBA. NHL, I don't think it really matters whether there's fans there or not. There's so much activity and ambient sound. So it all looks okay. You watch on TV. Is it going to really look weird for these football players to be on this huge field in these huge stadiums and there's nobody there? Is that where we're really going to notice? Oh, geez, there's no fans in the stands. Is that the sport where, from a viewing standpoint, it's going to look really strange?
I think it'll be more strange for the players than it will be for the fans. These days, there are so many digital options that can be worked out to make it appear as though there are actually, people sitting in the seats on TV. The players on the field and on the sidelines, that's a completely different ballgame. They're going to have to be looking around and not being able to jump up into the stands to give somebody a high five when they score a touchdown. There's not going to be anyone there. The NFL and the teams could go the route that we've seen in MLB and elsewhere, where they've sold the ability to put up cutouts in the stands, which would be a great revenue generator for the teams and the ballparks. I know that the league is considering piping in, fan noise like everyone else is doing. Watching the game on TV, though, yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. There is a way, like I said, to inject digital images so that it appears there are fans in the stands. But most of the action now is going to turn to more of what's going on in the field while we work through the pandemic. There'll be more time spent on the players, on the sidelines, possibly filling in gaps, with, I don't know, players picking their noses. Who knows? But you're not going to see cameras panning around the stadium. The kiss cams and things like that, those are gone. It's a different ballgame completely this year. It's unlike anything we've ever had to try to deal with. And there's no way to come up with a truly viable solution based on what is already available. I mean, it's going to come down to almost winging it to some degree and hoping for the best. And we've already seen that hoping for the best has worked really well for MLB, worked well for NBA, and even the NHL. So as big of an audience as NFL has, I think fans are going to be able to ignore the differences and concentrate on what's truly important, which is, the action on the field. Be a lot more stats thrown in this year than we've ever seen before for various reasons. First of all, sports gambling is taking a larger piece of the interest these days, but also it will give broadcasters something to generate enthusiasm and draw in better viewership without having fans in the stands.
Vic, I got a question for you. You're generally have your finger on the pulse of these things. How challenging is it going to be for bookmakers, for people betting on football this year? There's no home field advantage, so lines are going to have to reflect that. And the fact that we're going to probably have situations where players are going to be determined not eligible to play, maybe an hour and a half before a game because they test positive. How is that going to play as far as people being able to make bets and there being integrity in the betting?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I think that at the end of the day, they always figure it out, right? And so yesterday I was literally talking to an odds maker, Jeff Sherman of the Westgate, and he was telling me that for NBA at least, instead of the traditional 3 points for home court, they're doing about 1.5 to 2. So they've definitely, adjusted that, kind of accounted for that. When it comes to the home court, he said public's still betting a lot of favorites, so they have to adjust the lines, and so they have kind of charts for players' values so that way they can quickly make the line moves. But at the end of the day, for them, it's always about balancing it out. So, but more than ever, you nailed it. There's going to be a lot of late scratches. We've already started to see that a lot with injuries, right? But since the rise of fantasy and since the rise of the gambling, it's important for the NFL to be truthful with a lot of the stuff to the public, right? That's kind of what's helped catapult the game in a way. And so it is going to be tough, though, because they're going to have to literally post it, be on top of it, announce the scratches, and then odds makers are going to have to quickly move lines if they're getting hammered one way or another by the sharps or the syndicates or the people with big money, right? So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be challenging. I think you're going to see a lot of late money and a lot of late line moves this year more than ever.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And again, it's you said that are 20. What do you say? 22 days? We're 22 days away.
22 days.
That blew my mind, man. I mean, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, really? It's 3 weeks. As fast as this year is gone, man. Boy, that's incredible. 3 weeks. It's amazing. So, we're gonna try to. We'll be definitely talking more NFL here over these next 3 weeks, as we get ready to crank up our NFL content for the 2020 season. If we're having a season, we're gonna have the content, and Vic's gonna be a big part of that. Vic, before we go, who you got? Who's your PGA pick this week? Speaking of Vic's picks, who do you like?
Just submitted it, man.
So close last week, Vic. So close.
Oh my God, I was going crazy, man. I had 4 guys in the top 10, and the leader going into Sunday. So watching that, so the funniest thing is my wife and kids were not home, and so I have a beer, my first day to myself. I'm watching this thing, literally like we're gonna do it again, and so it's so frustrating. The swings to watch were just crazy, but so close yet so far, man. And at the end of the day, if you don't win, you don't win. But I'm just happy to have some consistency, right? That's what I'm trying to go for. Like every Sunday, as long as our guys are in it, that's the name of the game. So, man, I mean, the chalky pick, obviously Justin Thomas, he's dominated this course. I like Jason Day, man. And you're a big golf guy, obviously. But to me, he's finally rounding into form. His last 4 outings have been terrific. He hasn't won at TPC Boston, but he's done really well there in the past, including a second. So, I think it's Day or Thomas. I have a couple other guys I wrote up and just submitted to you to post. So, be on the lookout on SportsIntel.com.
That's right. That's going up today, and now we know what Vic does when his wife's not home, which is always good to know. I'm liking Dustin Johnson.
Yeah,
good, man. Morikawa has to make the greatest shot in the history of golf, in the PGA to beat him, and he's been playing real well, and so I think he might go a little bit overlooked, and but I like him. He seems to have. Whatever was wrong with him earlier in the year, he seems to have fixed it. So
he'll be there. He'll be there.
I'm going on the DJ train there.
You're getting some good odds. Like you said, he's a little overlooked right now because of that. And so to get him at I forgot what it was, like 20 something.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to throw some money on that guy.
Yeah, he's a different guy than he was about a month ago. No, I don't think there's any doubt about it. So, all right. Well, hopefully Vic's wearing pants. And we hope all of you are as well. We are going to say goodbye on this special Wednesday edition of the Sports Intel podcast. We'll be back on Tuesday when we'll only be about 16 days away from the kickoff of the NFL season. And I suspect we will talk more not about the coronavirus. We actually might talk about football Tuesday instead of the virus. We might even start talking about some fantasy draft pick sleepers and players to watch, players to avoid. And it'll be good to actually talk about some real football. But for now, for Eric and for Vic, this is Jeff Goldberg saying thank you. And don't be afraid to swing on 3-0. And we'll talk to you again next week.